The UFC last week was a reflection of what little light we have in the dark ages of the Paramount era, where promotion is offloaded from the promotion to the fighters, and almost no one seems happy about it. I'm talking about how Sean Strickland saved the middleweight division once again, but also about how UFC fans hate exactly what the UFC needs the most right now: a reason to care. See, I'm convinced UFC fans absolutely hate fun because for months, if not years, the entire MMA community has complained about how everything sucks now. And I agree, but for the first time in a while, we get fighters who are actually trying to entertain ahead of the fights, and what do people do? Complain? The gradual intensification of the UFC is undeniable at this point. Merit is irrelevant, fight nights are full of apex slop matchmaking, and fans have no reason to care about most fights, and it's all because the UFC doesn't give a fuck anymore. Promotion is basically non-existent. While there are always some who will insist this slop the UFC shits out is quite delicious actually, I argue it doesn't matter that half of the 15 unranked fights are fireworks if the UFC does not provide a reason for fans to sit for 6 hours on a Saturday night beyond not having anything better to do. No storylines, no ranked fighters or title contention implications, etc. In short, most fans lack excitement because most fights and fight cards have no stakes. What this means is that in the current MMA ecosystem, if you want any sort of excitement, any storyline to follow, or any fun or hype to build up ahead of the fight, we must turn to the rare fighter who steps up to their new role in the sport. Fighters cannot be only fighters anymore. They must be their own promoters as well. Enter Sean Strickland and Josh Hokit. What both of these guys have in common, beyond being annoying American patriots, is that they are putting in the effort that no one else will. Filling the void of the rotting UFC machine, they actually care. And them caring enough to try is the only thing providing fans that reason to care that we so desperately need. It's no coincidence that the press conference between Sean Strickland and Chimaev peaked at a whopping 200,000 live viewers. Whether it was fake beef or not, the rivalry between Sean and Khamzat managed to make us care about a fight where the vast majority of fans saw a Khamzat victory as a foregone conclusion. Think about that for a second. Most fans predicted Khamzat would either submit Sean within a round or lay on top of him for 25 minutes. And yet, even though we all expected Sean to not only lose, but to lose in a boring fashion, their antics to build up the fight made people care anyway. These guys made us care enough to reserve a Saturday night to see an end to their story. While many fans are talking about their performances inside the octagon, this is the biggest takeaway from last week for me. The fake beef so many fans were whining about is exactly what the UFC has been missing. That's the only reason we were so invested in the fight. Fake bad blood or not, this is what makes fans out of a sport with no uniforms or hometown teams to root for. And many hardcore fans now whine about how it's becoming like WWE, as if storylines weren't the reason the sport exists. What the hell did you think The Ultimate Fighter was all about? You know, the show credited with saving the sport from certain doom? Or just think of all the most iconic fights, the most iconic fighters that saved entire divisions, and who they fought against. Think of who got you into the sport and how. Chances are it was Conor McGregor against Aldo, Nate Diaz, or Khabib perhaps. Maybe it was Dominic Cruz and the Team Alpha Male Chronicles. John Jones against Gus or DC. Ferguson versus Khabib. The list goes on. These storylines of intense rivalry and high-level competition is the lifeblood of any sport, but especially combat sports. So, what happens when merit is taken out of the equation, or the style matchup has zero intrigue? What happens when we start getting fights like Stipe versus Jones and big old 2025? What happens when the UFC stops caring and put fights no one cares about? Strickland versus Khamzat could have easily been one of these fights. A fighter who arguably did not deserve the title shot, stepping up to fight a Chechen monster as a 5-1 underdog or something. Were it not for the trash talk and the storyline, many of us would have likely missed Sean's second all-time upset. And now that the beef has been squashed, does anyone regret it? Strickland, Khamzat, thank you for your service. But enough about them. This wasn't the only lesson from last week. Josh Hokit saved the day and stole the spotlight that was desperately looking for a lead to focus on. Had it not been for Hokit, that press conference would have been as dull and boring as any other. But not on his watch. Josh Hokit came prepared and on a mission. He gave everyone something to laugh, talk, or complain about, and got kicked off stage for his efforts. And full transparency, I enjoyed it. I think the guy's hilarious. Cringe, but hilarious. I laughed out loud when he chuckled at himself every time he said, "Am I right, New Jersey?" And my jaw dropped with his last line about Toporia's ex-wife. No more of this, "tell us what it would mean to you to win on your hometown" bullshit. Enough! This is promotion. This, even if artificially, builds storylines. Like, think of what Hokit did against Pereira. That was on purpose. He anticipates Pereira to be a champion, and now he has a storyline, if he wins his next fight, to go against the champion. This builds hype. In lack of actual promotion, merit, or effort from the UFC, Hokit is willingly becoming the bad guy and embarrassing himself as a modern-day jester just to make us care. I know this type of shtick is not for everyone, and I don't blame anyone for finding the obviously intentional cringe act too cringe for MMA. I get it. I hated Cejudo and I hated Colby, but Hokit is somehow a breath of fresh air. Unlike Cejudo, who also doubled down on his cringe-worthy character, Hokit's cringe is not accidental at all. Unlike Covington, the hate-worthiness of Hokit's act is not an excuse to be an insufferable piece of shit, even if Hokit still pushes hot buttons and crosses some lines. When you watch Josh talk in interviews and contrast him on stage, it is clear he's not merely using his persona to exaggerate the worst of his real personality. I say this with all due respect. What Hokit is doing is essentially the same as becoming a clown. He's knowingly putting up makeup, a big red nose, and comically large shoes just to entertain us in one of the weakest eras of the sport. He's extremely self-aware of his role as a performer, be it inside the octagon or on a press conference stage. While it may not be your cup of tea, god damn it, you have to at least appreciate the effort. But alright, you are an MMA purist and hate both the big drama show and the clown antics to promote fights. I respect it. I get it. Trust me, I do. My problem with this stance, though, is that this approach only works, it only makes sense in a sport that respects merit and where the fights we want actually get made. In this scenario, we can afford a selling point to be strictly about the interesting matchmaking and inherent stakes in high-level competition. Sadly, heartbreakingly so, this is not that sport. If it ever was, not anymore. Just look at the White House card for just a few examples. Cyril Gane will have his 10th title shot after one of the most egregious fouls ever and a robbery victory. Ilia Topuria will fight a washed-up Justin Gaethje who barely anyone is giving a chance just because he beat a bum Paddy Pimblett. Instead of the most obvious bantamweight fight we've all begged for years, we're getting an Ariel Helwani impersonator against an old troll doll. Forget about Arman and Movsar fighting for the belt, or Jones versus Aspinall, etc. The UFC will only give us the fights they are willing to pay for as long as they maximize their profits, whether the fans want them or not. After coming to terms with reality, my dear MMA purist, tell me, what is the alternative? Do you prefer we continue with melatonin-based promotion? I guess you prefer the stoic fighters who all give the same predictable answers to the same predictable questions. Maybe you prefer there's no promotion at all and we do it Bellator style, where we hear about events maybe the day after they happen. I know this is a false dichotomy, and what we actually need is a change in UFC leadership. The heroes we need are legit, business savvy fight fans who are willing to invest back into the quality of the sport and promotion instead of extracting every last penny from it. We need Dana and Hunter Campbell gone, along with the entire TKO group. Sadly, we live on planet Earth in 2026, and none of that shit will happen anytime soon. So, do you prefer the status quo of a dying sport, or can you appreciate the effort from the few people that are actually trying? With all that being said, I insist the likes of Hokit, Strickland, Paulo Costa, etc. may not be the heroes we need, but they are exactly the heroes we deserve. This is the entertainment we deserve for letting the UFC ruin the sport we love with their greed. How many of us have defended or ignored Dana White, fighter pay, their monopoly, the way they do business, the PR narratives they abuse to destroy careers, etc.? How many of us turn a blind eye to the corruption and unethical business practices behind the scenes that allowed it all to get this bad? At the end of the day, if you don't like that this is the way things are, just know it's a direct result of the only MMA promotion with unlimited resources and talent refusing to put any effort into promoting fights. In other words, don't hate the players, hate the game. This was 8 MMA. Peace out.